All right. Well, I've been a photographer for close to 25, 30 years now. I do a verse uh, body of work. I've worked in production field. I was photographer at Channel 11 for a while, where I was a shooter editor. I taught, kids. I'm still teaching kids in schools. And so I just wanted to show you the body of work that I have. The first piece that you're going to see is called John and Sarah. And this was my great 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 grandparents. And this image was before photography. And they were enslaved in North Carolina in the 1800s. Sarah, she was born in 1827 and she died in 1931. She was a midwife and an herbalist. And my great grandfather, he was born in 1832 and he died in 1915. And he was a master carpenter and stonemason. And so how I got started with this project, it started at a family reunion, and they had this particular image set up at the reunion, and I was just fixed upon them, and I wanted to know more about their history because my history was not a history that was told. And so it was important for me to go back and get a true understanding of who they were. And these are some of my relatives. That's my Uncle Joe sitting there smoking his pipe as I'm doing his interview. And I videotaped all of their interviews. And the woman that's on the right hand side, her name is Honora Morton, and she's my mother's first cousin. And she was a school teacher in Middleburg, North Carolina. That's where that's where this story takes place in North Carolina. And so this particular day, we were at the grave sites of John and Sarah. This is interesting. Once I started the project, and there was a local newspaper that wrote a story about the project and what we were doing in North Carolina. And this woman, her name is Mrs. Martin. And come to find out, she is the great great granddaughter of my great great grandmother's slave owner. And it was interesting how it's almost, and this is an image that she took of my great great grandmother, and you could see her shadow in the bottom half of her dress there, which was very powerful. So she gave me that photograph, and she knew of my great grandmother because just before she passed, she delivered her as a child. So the history goes back that far. This was their house. And it was interesting. In 1879, they had $500 and they purchased 120 acres of land at that point. And my great great grandfather, he built the house since he was a master carpenter. And when I was there in the 90s, all of these images are from the 90s that I took of that particular site and home place. And it's amazing. It was amazing for me to just be able to walk back and get an understanding of, their struggles, their triumphs, their victories, and being able to own land during, right at the end of slavery, and to be able to build upon that and actually raise their family there. The image on the left was their bedroom, and the image on the right is the plantation house in which Sarah was enslaved at. And she was on the Hawkins plantation, and she was born there. And later, she was the assistant to the Dr. William Hawkins. And basically, he was a local physician, and she went around and, did assisted him with tending to people. And so that's how she became a midwife. So when we did this video, it was interesting. I got a lot of oral traditions from Mrs. Martin, my family members, and different people. And so I had to go to the archives and take their information and try to match it up in the archives to make it make sense. And these here are all the reenactments that we did for the video. And the image on the right, Thaddeus Mosley, was in my video. And this was Sarah when she was a young girl. And the interesting thing, she was given to the slave owner's daughter as a playmate. So they grew up as a playmate with each other. That's how the oral tradition goes. This is another series of Sarah when she met John, and that was early on. And this is Thaddeus and my mother. My mother actually was in my video, and we filmed all this stuff in Wexford and places like that. And so it was a grassroots approach to trying to put together a family's history and understanding and trying to gain understanding for the future generations. And I also created a museum exhibit that goes along with the video. And so the museum exhibit is 32 feet in length. And this particular photo was taken in Chicago. It was at the Chicago Historical Society. And it actually took me 6 years to produce this project, from gathering the oral histories, videotaping people while they were still alive, and then going to the archives and building the installation simultaneously. And it was quite an adventure. And I had to raise money along the way to afford to do this. And Janet Sarball and Jerry Kay, who's no longer with us, supported me in the very beginning. And I was able to, take this dream of seeing that image of John and Sarah and turn it into, a reality. These are some other detail shots of my interpretation of what their 1879 house would have been. And this is like the cornerstone of the installation, with their images together. And this was an article that the Chicago Tribune had done on the project when it was there. And it was interesting. Lonnie Bunch, who is now, in charge of many museums, the African American Museum at the Smithsonian, actually brought John and Sarah to Chicago. So I had an opportunity to meet him before he moved on to DC. This is a interesting installation that I did over at the Cary Furnace in Rankin. I was one of the artists that was chosen for the Alloyed Pittsburgh project, where artists do site installation work. And this particular room that I was working in was where all of the information about the steel mill, the data, and the various things like that on the particular furnaces was gathered. And so they were able to gauge how much coke and various elements that were needed to make steel. And so what I did was the workers at that time were also data. And so I encased archival photographs of African American steelworkers that worked in that particular plant. And there's also a video that we'll have in the chat that you can check out later of talking about their experience in per se. It's in poetic form. I collaborated with another artist to do that. And so this was at the Carry Furnace, which was a great experience for me. And it was a growing experience because I walked into this room. I knew I had to produce a work there. I just felt it. And, you know, being able to overcome the obstacles of working in that environment and actually creating a really cool piece um, was a powerful thing for me uh, because when I first walked in there, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but it came forth. It came forth. So the next thing that I wanted to share with you is that I'm also an arts educator. Um, I love working with children. I love exposing children to photography. And the picture on the left-hand side, we were using the Teenie Harris collection as a jump-off point where the kids were telling me what they seen in that particular. We were working with jazz musicians, and especially women jazz musicians. And we did a series, which you'll see on the bottom there, of shadow images that were behind a sheet. And the image on the right hand side, you can actually see them performing to that. And it was kind of interesting. The kids really gravitated to this photographic series. They learned how to do Photoshop, and so they walked away with some tangible skills that they could use at a later date. And it was an opportunity for them to learn how to critically think and look at photography just not as a snapshot, but a way that you can express yourself. As I said before, I'm a rostered artist. I didn't say before, but I'm a rostered artist with the state of Pennsylvania also. And this particular series, I had a residency at the Westinghouse High School for 4 years. And so this particular series, we were working with painting with light. And every student, the student actually made the composition with the light, and they partnered up with each other, and we created some beautiful work with that series also. The, the big thing for me at Westinghouse, I was talking about the civil rights movement, and a lot of the children, students there were clueless to the civil rights movement and the things that people had went through previously. And so we learned about the civil rights movement. And we learned about the photographs of the civil rights movement. And then I did a series of images where I projected the civil rights movement on them, sort of a lasting memory, a branding of sorts. And we did some beautiful projection imagery. This young lady, she chose Rosa Parks, and this is Rosa Parks' mugshot, and it's turned out very powerful. And the next image was the Black Power image, which was on the left, and Malcolm is on the right. And This image here is very powerful for me because this was before all the things that we've been faced with in current times. You know, Trayvon Martin was current at that time, and Emmett Till was before him. And this young man that was going to Westinghouse at that time, he reminded me of Trayvon Martin when we took the image. And so it's very powerful how kids absorb photography, kids utilize photography, and how they're able to express themselves through the medium. And that's why I continue to work today on exposing children to photography. This is a series of portraits. They're a mixed bag of portraits. I had to have my wife in the show, so I would hear about that if I didn't have her in the show. This is a portrait that I did of her in South Carolina, and when we were hanging out there one summer. And these are people that I just meet. If you know, and you know, if I meet someone on the street, you know, I'm always having my iPad or my phone with my work inside. And so I talk to folks and I ask people, can I photograph them? And her name is Stacy, and she was really cool. She was a great model. I loved her face. It was like, it took me back like to Irving Penn and his work, you know, in the 60s. And especially with the earrings and the silver lipstick and just her expression. So this was a piece where I I talk about fine art photography, but this piece here, when the genocide was happening in the Sudan, and those people, all the things that they were going through there, and there was nothing left. People, the women there were making um, cakes out of dirt just to defeat their children. You know what I mean? So their stomach felt like they had something in their stomach, and so I produced a whole series of images dealing with the Sudan and the genocide during that time period. Oh, this was a friend of mine. I used to live in California and I worked in a production studio in California. And if you notice all of my work, I love color, I love rhythm, I love shapes, contours, and the same thing in models. I love to bring out their beauty in that. And this was a model that I knew in California, and she was just an average person. And it's kind of funny how we met. Her mom was African American, and we used to cater parties together, and that's how we met. And I just started photographing her. She was one of the models that I worked with continuously out there. Again, the rhythm, the movement. This was I was in Braddock. I grew up in Braddock, and they had a gigantic pile of railroad tracks that was being scrapped at the scrapyard. So before they got rid of that stuff, I took this young lady and did a series of photographs with her. It's just something about her eyes, her gesture, and just the movement of the railroad tracks itself, which makes a really powerful piece. This here is more of a commercial fine art piece, the one on the left. I have a eyeglass shop on Melrose Avenue that I still do work for. And I produced a series of pieces with this model, and we were trying to make it where her face was like actually a mask, and so we were playing around with that a little bit. And the piece on this side was for a photo shoot for a magazine. That, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Oh, my computer. There we go. So again, it's all about that rhythm, that pattern, and just the beauty of her figure within that box, with the repetition on the socks, and then you have all that repetition behind her too, which makes a beautiful composition. And this is just some fashion stuff that I did for a portfolio for a friend of mine. Um, this piece was actually done. I had another friend that I used to photograph all the time. The photographers that are in the crowd, this particular um, process is high speed infrared film, which was like a medical film. And I used to shoot portraits with it. And the image is actually sharp, but you have to take the image out of focus to get the infrared effect. And all of this was done in the dark room, and I printed everything in the dark room. So that's I did a series of images with her, which was very beautiful. And I experiment still in the dark room with various chemicals and things like that. This is the series that I had spoke about, more than media, and it was a portrait series that I did on African American gay men, and this was at the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, in their room that they have art on the walls, and it was well received. And I think there was about 50 different guys that I had photographed for that series. And these are just outtakes of various images. And I was playing with the whole word association. Words have power, and especially if words get in your mind and get in your heart, it starts to take you over. And so I was playing around with just the movement, of a piece of string, but they were to establish the whole thing with words, in the power of words with that. This is some more of my contemporary stuff that I'm doing now. Um, Now I'm creating works that are more found object. They're works that are repurposed from various things that I find that I'm attracted to. And I am working to put my work in offices, hotels, offices, also residents, and taking my work into a different direction. And so these here are some of the pieces in a series of, of works that I've done. I've sold some works, and I'm continuing to market my work with various architectural and interior designers. And so these are some of those types of imagery. This particular series was I'm also a member of Associated Artists, and this series was in the show at the Associated Artists, um, and it actually won an award for the show that they had. And I used to sit up, and my mother, after she came from work, she used to roll her hair up, and she had hair curlers. So I used hair curlers and wire to make that particular piece there. And she used to fall asleep trying to get her hair rolled up every night. And the symbolism behind these are just pieces of wood that I put together to make these compositions, and they're very African. And I was trying to make them have like a story element, like they were, you know, like they're communicating with each other. And the piece in the front is more of a shield that's in that series also. This particular piece was like I was watching Alvin Ailey Dance Company one day, and I wanted to work with um, doing something around that. And it was interesting for me to watch Alvin Ailey dancers, and I took my glasses off so they were kind of blurred. And so I could see these shapes in the screen. And so even though my image is sharp, I still took that and worked that composition in that way. Again, these are all in that same African type of, uh, Indinkra type of symbols, but these aren't the actual Indinkra symbols. They're my symbols that I had made. And pretty much I like to play with any type of found object because it's fascinating to me to be able to do that. And again, this piece goes back to Irving Penn. I love Irving Penn's work. He's just one of the photographers that I really, really, really appreciate his work. And I wanted to share with you about See Clear, and you got a brief introduction to it. This is me and my wife. We bought this building probably about 8 years ago, and we've been working on it for 8 years. And we're putting in an arts and technology center, 3D printing. Upstairs, there'll be like an entrepreneurial accelerator where folks can come and learn how to do their business plans and whole things like that. And the kids downstairs, again, we want to create that whole creative thinking, open them up to the latest technologies. And then on the other side is our coffee house, which is called Urban Java. I just photoshopped that on there. It's not actually open. And we're going to have a coffee house where students will be able to pick up on their soft skills, and we would actually be training baristas in there and things like that. So it opens the whole community up, mothers, children, fathers. And this particular space is in McKeesport, and as you know, McKeesport has been, having a tough way of going, of sorts. And so we're, just open to try to make something new happen there. So this is our project. This is our dream project to get done. And the images on the other side is the right hand side of the storefront, and we put a lot of energy into it. We got it pretty much cleaned up. We have our electrical. We did some pallets and things like that on the walls. All of the plaster that was on the walls, I took off and exposed the brick. And we're trying to make something out of nothing. And I think that's my last slide. So please, if you have some questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
All right, and I'm going to allow everyone to unmute yourselves if you'd like to jump in and ask a question.
I'm curious what the recent artwork is. The ones that you had in the rooms, is it painting or printmaking, or is the photo involved somehow?
No, it's actually photography. It's actually photography, and all of those compositions that you've seen, I actually put those together and then I photographed them to make those compositions.
How do you do that?
Well, it's like I have a piece of white paper. I have all kind of stuff around me, and I lay it down and I photograph it. And so it depends, you know. I photograph it in various ways, and you know, so a lot of it's done. Like I said, I love Irving Penn's work, and a lot of it's done in that fashion where it's more straight on type of photography. But I also do some things from above. But no, all of those pieces that you see are actually photographs. They're not
Cool, thank you.
exhibitions. And later on, I go back into them and I tweak them and I add my color and things like that to them. But they're all photos.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I had a question about that series and kind of the transition, because, you know, a large part of your presentation was very, you know, narrative or portrait based work. And I was wondering if there was something, if you could pinpoint like that transition from, you know, one way of working into another more abstract way of working.
Well, you know, at when I was in California, there was a bunch of models out there, so I could photograph people like every week. When I moved back here to Pittsburgh, you know, I didn't have all of that around me anymore. So I started doing alternative things and I started appreciating that. I started appreciating working in my studio by myself, did not really have to please anyone but myself. Or if a client commissioned me to do something, yeah, you know, of course I did the work for them. But other than that, it just opened me up as an artist.
So I just wanted to say hi to Curtis. I haven't seen you in a while, and it's great to actually see, because I'm really familiar with your earlier work, but I haven't seen recent work, so it's nice to catch up. It's really cool.
And I thank you for your talk that you did
Okay.
last week. So it was great. It was great.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Curtis and I go way back. We haven't seen each other in years, though. It's cool. Yeah.
Oh no, we go back to, and this is some history for you. We go back to Silver Eye on the south side.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was way back when.
Yeah.
Hey, some of you other folks out there, I don't know. Hey, introduce yourself. Ask me a question, please. Because I know I didn't say everything. I know you guys got something to say.
I actually have a question. I'm really curious about how you pivoted to also like photographing like found objects. I wanted to know like what your relationship was with the objects you photograph, or what draws you to the specific objects you photograph.
It could be anything. You know, just like before I started, you know, I ate an orange. You know, it could be this orange. And I'll see something in that orange and I'm like, oh, okay. And I start to work. And then that's how it develops. I don't have one set thing that I go to and say, oh, I'm just going to photograph steel. You know, I photograph steel, I photograph plastic, I photograph anything that I'm attracted to has rhythm, contour, shape, and repetition.
Awesome, thanks. I also wanted to ask about the colors that you have in your most recent work. I was introduced to your work when you first came into Small Mall and you dropped off your work for us to sell. And I really noticed that the colors were really vibrant. And the photos, like the first one you showed of like with like the green and the red, it's like so vibrant. And it's like, it also has that like finish. It's like very like metallic, like it reminds me of like patina or like rust and stuff. I just like want to know like how you go about like choosing colors or like why you do monochromatic photographs. Also, like I know your object series are pretty monochromatic from what I've seen.
Right, right. No, I love color. Color works for me. If you come to my house, every room in my house is color. From like apple green to golds to oranges. And so that's the way my work is. And so I love saturated type of color and applying that to my imagery. And I think, they work in harmony together uh, to really create some beautiful works.
Awesome.
Hey, I see Lori out there. Is that Lori?
Yes, but I'm being shy and not on camera today.
Work is what are you talking about? No. Lori, if you ever seen Lori's work, her work is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Her work is gorgeous.
But I was really happy I hadn't known about your project that you shared first about the installation. That was really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I did that a while ago, but it was just a great experience because African Americans as a whole, we don't have a history. And if we do, our history is broken and it's never really told. You know what I mean? Our history sometimes is in the family Bible. And if that Bible is not passed on to generations, it's lost. And so it was vitally important for me to go back while I could and actually talk to the elders and actually pull that project off. And the project is so big, it takes an 18-wheeler to move that thing around the country.
Oh, wow.
And so,
Do you
yeah,
have that stored in McKeesport anywhere?
yeah. And so what my goal is now is to take that project and do a piece where it's dealing with projections and holograms and things like that, and to take it a step further, and all I have to do is walk into a gallery with a DVD instead of 25, 30 pieces. Everybody's like looking at me crazy when I tell them, yeah, we're going to put this together.
Are there any plans to put it back together?
Yeah. The next time I put it together, I'm going to do that virtual type of setting. I'm going to retire it. I'm not going to mess with it after that. I want to put it in a gallery space, in a museum space that people can be immersed around it. And so it's figuring out exactly how to do that. And so I've been working on that probably for about 2 years now, because I don't want it to look hokey. You know what I mean? A hologram thing can look a little hokey after a while. So trying to make it realistic, So. Is that Edith? Do I see Edith? Edith.
Hey Curtis, how's it going?
How are you tonight?
I'm pretty good. I came on really late, but I'm very familiar with your work.
Well, hey, that's right, because we're familiar with each other. And I appreciate you coming on and checking it out.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing people might not know is that Curtis lent one of his photographs to a project that I did with people in Hazelwood. And so we Curtis and some other artists, we made some drawing prompts based on their work. So yeah, I got to spend a lot of time with Curtis, and I still do. Yeah, we both live in the Mon Valley.
Yep. And
Thank-
in the piece that Edith is talking about, when I was talking about the Alvin Ailey dancers, in that orange piece, it's orange with the movement. That was the piece that I had donated to Edith with that for that particular project.
I was actually wondering, it seemed like that was had very graphic elements. So I thought it had perhaps been a collage, the portions that were of the circular circle representing the head. Was it collage and the photograph, or?
No, no. I created the background.
Uh-huh.
The background was let me see. That particular background was a piece of rusted steel that I had photographed and played around with to make the background. But those pieces were pieces of wood that was put together to make that composition. Hey, Warren Jackson, I'm calling people out, man.
Yes, sir.
What's up, buddy?
You, man, technologically challenged.
Are
Can't
you?
get my camera on. Don't laugh.
Oh, I won't. But you can ask the question. You've been with me. Warren Jackson has been with me forever. He's a cartoonist.
Only since the 80s.
Yeah, we've known each other forever, before I had gray hair. And so we go way back. And so he knows my work really well. And I'm glad that you had an opportunity.
If you don't mind me asking, are there any paintings, large format paintings in your future?
Yeah, actually I am, because I got a bunch of plywood.
Manually painting, not Photoshop?
Actually painting. I love to paint.
Okay, I know.
Yeah. So no, I'm going back. You know, Warren, if we were talking not too long ago, I'm going back to my old work. I'm
Beautiful.
going backwards because I don't know. It's just like you can make a whole bunch of pretty images. I can make pretty images, but I want to go backwards and start
Well,
experimenting.
it's not. It's not so much backwards. It's just going into another vein.
Yeah, that flavor. You know?
Exactly. Some of that Jacob Lawrence, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, I want to smell Stop Bath once again, you know, and things like that.
Say that again?
Yeah, I love the smell of Stop Bath.
Really?
Oh, I hear you.
Stop Bath is a great smell. Look at Sue. She's looking at me like, he's crazy.
I mean, I still print in the darkroom too, but I don't like the smell, really.
Man.
Yeah, but I still do it, yeah.
You know, I got frustrated in the dark room because I didn't have like a great dark room space and I was fighting dust all the time.
Mm.
And so it was like, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm wasting my paper. So I started scanning everything. I started scanning all my negatives, and that was a lot easier. You know,
Nice.
and clean them up and print them real quick. And but I'm going to go back to the dark room.
I like your new stuff. Those paintings you showed. I got in a little late, but you were showing the Alvin Ailey inspired stuff.
Right.
And the Indinkra stuff, man. That's electric.
Yeah. I have all of this stuff that I showed. This is just a snippet. I have series of all of those things. So, you know, and most of my series are usually between like 85 and 100 images that I'm experimenting, and I'm changing each and every one of them, you know, to build those compositions out. So, it's work. It's work.
Yeah.
And I'm also working with Monmade and working with their accelerator that they have for creatives. And, you know, they have a lot of contacts with, you know, all the redevelopment and different things like that. And my work fits right through here.
I really love the work you're doing with the students and how you use history and photography, and it's spectacular, really, the work you do together. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I worked at Propel, um, and I won't do this. I know this might sound a shame, but I won't do it. I had a residency where I worked with kids every day.
Wow.
I can't do that no more.
Yeah.
No, it was just like unreal, and all the kids. I taught them how to hold the camera, and I'm not talking about a little El Cheapo camera. I taught them how to do Photoshop and, you know, all those things like that. And when I was done with that residency, I was like wiped out.
I bet. Yeah.
And so I'll do residencies, but they'll only be 2 or 3 days, and, you know, not a whole year.
I was curious about the series you did also with the gay Black men. I think it's really great that you did that series, just kind of focusing on individuals who kind of like exist in that specific intersection who are marginalized. I was curious, did you also, and forgive me if you mentioned this in your presentation, but did you interview the individuals as well, or?
No, I was commissioned through this guy. You might know him. His name is Derek Times. He commissioned me
Okay,
to
yeah.
do all those portraits. And there was conversations and different things as I was doing the work, but no, there was never a written portion of their struggle. I was trying to bring their uniqueness out within the portraits.
Got it. Thank you.
Curtis.
Go ahead.
Curtis.
That's one.
It's Warren again. You think you'll bring the dot principle back?
Oh, of course. Of course.
I'd like to see that large format on wood.
Yeah, that's some of the things that I'm also been thinking about. And I'm also taking, like, if you look at some of those African pieces, I'm also branching more into public art and those, trying to turn those pieces into large sculptures and things like that. So I have a whole bunch of different, you know, aspirations and things that I'm working on simultaneously and trying to keep a roof over my head too.
Do you have any other questions on the floor or from the floor? All right, so I think since we're nearing around 9 o'clock, I'm gonna start closing. But I wanted to ask one final question before we all left is, how can we, Curtis, how can we support you through this time, like through COVID? Do you have social media? We know you have a website. I'll share the link in the chat. But most importantly, how can we support you during this time?
Well, I think the biggest thing is conversation, because everybody has something different and unique to bring to the table, and so if I could have dialogue with people, that's really cool. You know, if people have folks that don't mind getting dirty, we're constantly still working on the building. They want to come and volunteer for that. If they want me to make some art for them, you know, I'm always down to do that too. So, you know, I'm just open, you know, to be, you know, a vehicle for folks to be able to, you know, have a springboard for some creativity to happen, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Your presentation was so wonderful and so powerful.
It made sense. You know what I mean? Because you get on these things and you're like, oh, okay, here we go. But, you know, I hope it made sense.
Yeah, no, it was great. I loved every second of it. It was so wonderful. Everyone, we recorded this presentation. We're going to have it available on Small Mall's website. And we also have a nice little archive now of previous Tiny Talks. So you can see Sue, who was our guest last week, and Sarah Jacob. She was one of our previous artists who presented through Small Mall, and their talks will be online soon. We have a few already up right now, where it's kind of like a work in progress. And we do have a few more talks lined up coming up soon, both just Small Mall, both Small Mall Pittsburgh Photo Fair collaborations, and also the speaker series, which I mentioned earlier. Thank you so much, everyone. If you want to see Curtis's video from his Carry Furnace installation, I linked it in the chat. It's in the Rivers of Steel website, and I also put his website in the chat box as well. So I'd love to take some time to give Curtis a little round of applause, or like a little sparkle thing, whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. Tune in. Let's see. Check the Small Mall website this Sunday, and I will have signups for the next talks up, I swear.